The big story from Asia is that Russia is uneasy with the ceasefire deal that U.S. President Donald Trump hashed out with the Ukrainian leadership this week. President Putin issued a statement about this on Thursday. He said the idea of a 30-day ceasefire sounds good in some ways, but that he's not sure about some aspects of the deal, especially what it would mean for Ukrainian soldiers who are in Kursk. That's the part of Russia that the Ukrainians pushed into last August in a surprise offensive, and Putin has been unable to push them out. So this is part of the deal that he is sort of unsure about, and he said, quote, "If we stop the hostilities for 30 days, what does it mean? Does it mean that everyone who's there in Kursk will leave without a fight? Or the Ukrainian leadership will give them an order to lay down their arms and just surrender? How will it be? It is not clear." End quote. And then Putin also said that he won't sign anything unless he gets guarantees that during those 30 days, the Ukrainians will not use the time to regroup and rebuild their forces. Now, he didn't offer any promises that Russia would not regroup and rebuild their forces during those 30 days, but he wants someone to promise him, apparently in a verifiable way, that Ukrainian forces definitely will not do that. And then earlier on Thursday, Russia's officials said that they would need other requirements before they would agree to the ceasefire as well. And it was really the same list of maximalist demands that the Russians have often discussed: total Ukrainian surrender, elimination of the Ukrainian military, Ukraine cut off from Western aid, Ukraine letting Russia have essentially a foothold on the Dnipro River's west bank so that it can stage a new offensive deep into Ukraine's heartland soon, and getting rid of Ukraine's elected leadership as well, so that Russia could be free to install basically a collaborationist regime. So these are pretty outlandish demands from Russia, and maybe we are supposed to consider some of those earlier demands nullified by Putin's later statement, the statement that came later in the day, but he didn't specifically say that he's backing off on those earlier demands. So it seems like even though Putin is giving some lip service to the ceasefire deal, when you look at his conditions, it seems that he's not really going for it. So the big question now is, what will U.S. President Donald Trump do? You know, after announcing this deal, Mr. Trump said the ball was in Putin's court. But now with Putin issuing these contingencies and provisos, that ball seems to be back in Mr. Trump's court once again. And we'll have to see how Mr. Trump responds to Putin. He really seemed to bend over backwards to please Putin. He also promised his constituents here in the U.S. that he would end the war in 24 hours. So he may be getting frustrated with Putin's pretty tepid response to this ceasefire deal. But this is also an interesting indication that we've just gotten from Putin that Russia may not be in a great position right now. You know, you would think that Russia would relish a chance to have 30 days to regroup and rebuild their forces, and then they could get back to killing and destroying with renewed vigor. But instead, it seems Putin views that as less advantageous than whatever the Ukrainians could gain by building their forces up for those same 30 days. And Russia doesn't want to give them that time. And it has been truly remarkable to see the European Union, ever since President Trump seemed to be trying to appease Russia more, the EU started backing Ukraine far more meaningfully. And they're now taking funds from Russian assets that have been seized, and they're pumping all those funds into Ukraine. And this is billions and billions of dollars worth of new weaponry. So Russia appears to be nervous about all of that European aid materializing on the battlefields in the next few weeks. So we don't yet know what Mr. Putin or Mr. Trump will do and how this will all shake out. But one thing that we can be sure of is that whatever happens in the near term, we should expect Vladimir Putin to come out of the whole thing unbroken and actually even stronger. And the reason we can be sure of that is because of what Trumpet Editor-in-Chief Gerald Fleury has said about Putin's role in a future Asian alliance. There are multiple Bible passages that discuss this huge end-time alliance of Asian nations. You can read about it in the books of Daniel and Joel and Revelation. And then there's a lengthy passage about it in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39. Those chapters are largely about an individual called the Prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. And Mr. Fleury has said for more than 10 years now that these three names refer to Russia and two of its important cities, and he has maintained that this passage is describing Vladimir Putin. He goes through the details of all of that in his booklet, The Prophesied Prince of Russia, and it shows that Putin's most important days and his most important battles and wars are still ahead for him. So however things may go with this ceasefire and with other near-term developments, we should expect Putin to come out of it all unbroken and even strengthened. And for anyone who would like to learn more about the details of all that, I hope that you'll go to thetrumpet.com and order your free copy of The Prophesied Prince of Russia. And then we've also got a couple of smaller stories about Asia this week. First, Russia has just announced that it'll be conducting a major set of naval war games later this month alongside the navies of China and Iran. These will be in the Gulf of Oman, and they'll be focusing on practicing striking maritime targets especially. And this is actually the 5th time that Russia, China, and Iran have held joint naval exercises since 2019. So it is a regular occurrence now, but that doesn't mean that it isn't significant to see these powers, all of whom long for the destruction of the US-led global order, practicing together for the time when they decide to take action toward that end. And then one final story here about China. A fascinating Wall Street Journal article was published this week showing that China is using gray zone strategies to gradually expand its borders in basically every direction. These are not new revelations, but it is very powerful to see them all laid out together in this analysis. It details the way China is slowly pushing into Bhutan and India. They start by sending just herders across the borders to graze their animals inside of India and Bhutan. And then they build small shelters eventually. Then they upgrade those shelters to official outposts. And then they begin sending some soldiers in. Then they build roads that link these outposts to China. And then they build little villages along the roads. And they order Chinese people to move there and live there. And then finally, the Chinese start saying that it has always been Chinese land. So it takes several years, even decades, but it is expanding China's borders little by little. And the article shows how this is similar to what China has done in the South China Sea. First building artificial islands there, and then militarizing those islands and turning them into bases from which Chinese warships can bully other vessels in the area. The Chinese do all this very gradually, very slowly with this gray zone strategy, and it is remarkable to see just how effective their persistence with this is.